Hello, hello. It's after 3:16 in Melbourne, Australia. 3 o'clock is like my brick wall. I don't know why I thought it was a good idea to go live at 3 p.m. 3 p.m. is my brick wall. Hello, Tanya. Hi, Kate. So let's see if I can get my brain to tap out some stuff, hey? Hi, Scout. I am tired, but what I do is I know how my brain works. I'm very clued into, this little thing called PDA. Hi, Emma. So what I do is I get an idea that I might like to do a live, and then before my PDA gets in there and goes, no, I just hit the live button, which causes a lot of problems, really. I obsessed about my collar for the first part, and I looked at my nostrils being lopsided. Hi, Alana. Anyway, I thought I might talk about bedtime. Hi, Nicola. Because so many people email me and comment on my posts and ask about bedtime. Hi, Charmaine. Isn't bedtime just an absolute nightmare sometimes? Oh, lordy, lordy. So, there's a few different aspects to why our children may struggle with bedtime. First of all, hi, Katie, welcome. Hi, Kari. How you going? If we're autistic, our brains really struggle to shut off at the end of the day. For me personally, afternoon, evening, nighttime, depending on how much quiet there is when I do my processing. So if I've been at school all day, the worst thing is to come home and have to do homework. I never got it done as a child because as soon as I get home, that's when I think about everything that's happened during the day. Now, that kind of processing goes on for a few hours, but because there's distractions like mum cooking dinner, siblings running around, maybe I'm engaged in some jumping on the trampoline outside, I'm just recollecting what my days were like after school, talking on the phone with friends. So there's a few distractions in there. So processing is happening, but it's not really in its element until bedtime, because bedtime is the time where we lay there with no interruptions and our brain just goes, takes off, absolutely takes off. And, it just is so hard to shut down. We'll be thinking about what we said to people, whether we came across as okay. We worry about whether we hurt someone's feelings. We might be upset about something that happened during the day with another person. We might be feeling anxious about something that's coming up tomorrow or in 10 weeks' time. It doesn't really matter. Or we might have something that we really want to do and we can't do it right now, which is painful, so we lay in bed and we fixate. So there's a whole plethora of reasons why getting off to sleep when we're autistic happens. But then we can add in some other alphabet letters like ADHD. So if we just jump up a notch to ADHD, then we have the hyperactivity element. Now, the difference between a brain without ADHD and a brain with ADHD at bedtime and in terms of when we get tired is that when a child with an ADHD profile gets tired, overtired, they've almost got a sweet spot where we need to get in there and support them to, get ready for bed. Because once we move beyond that sweet spot, that hyperactivity kicks in. Now, most people go looking for a physical expression of hyperactivity when they hear ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder for those who aren't aware. But the hyperactivity can also be in here. It can also be in here. We might feel like we have restless legs or bugs crawling through our bodies, or we might have the racing thoughts on steroids. We might be jumping all over the place with our thoughts about, what's happened and what's got to happen. Very, very similar to what I was referring to with the autistic brain. But with ADHD, the more tired we get, the more hyperactive we get. So it's a bit of a catch-22, and it's really important to be able to observe where that sweet spot is and kind of work out how we're going to take care of whipping them into bed. Emma says, I've seen this with my son. His brain just goes into overdrive with all these thoughts while lying in bed. He'll talk and not stop. I've told him he needs to turn his brain down so he can go to sleep. Yeah, but being told to turn our brain down doesn't really help us turn our brain down, as well-intentioned as it is. So if we chuck in then anxiety, demand avoidance, or PDA, pathological demand avoidance, whole other kettle of fish. So sleep time is a demand for those of us with a PDA brain. It is demand pressure and it triggers our threat response. It's also not really in alignment for us to do what everybody else is doing, especially when we know that everybody else is doing it. And sleep time, often children with a PDA autistic expression will say, I really want to go to sleep, but my brain will not let me. And when they say that, they are telling the truth. It's the brain's job to protect us. Everybody has a threat response that triggers us into fight, flight, freeze or fawn. Words, 3 p.m, brick wall for me. That probably doesn't make sense. So we all have that response. If we didn't, we wouldn't be alive. Man would not exist. Humans would not exist. But the PDA brain does not know the difference between an actual threat and a perceived threat. And bedtime is a threat because it's a demand. Now, demands aren't just somebody telling us it's time to go to bed. It's an implied demand. So when we know that there's an expectation that we will engage with a particular activity at a particular time, our brain will do everything in its power to prevent us from doing that. It's perceiving bedtime as a threat, and it's ordering us to not comply in order to keep us alive. So the brain's doing its job really, really well. However, it's a little bit confused. And underneath that is the escalating anxiety for the child, because there may be parents on the outside who are only seeing the behaviour. So we tend to focus on behaviour in children, and we tend to translate behaviour based on what we see. We don't really know what's going on in here, or we look for emotionally driven reasons. Sometimes they're neurologically driven reasons, our wiring, our neurotype. So parents might see a child who is just refusing to go to bed. Parents might see, and not just parents, family, friends, this happens all the time during any kind of daily routine, school, breakfast, but specifically speaking about bedtime, this happens at bedtime. And as parents, we're human. Nighttime, tired, downtime required. Am I right or am I right? Nighttime, I'm hanging out to just have a bit of downtime. I'm autistic and ADHD and PDA, and that's my time where I just like to chill out. I like to get in front of a screen because I find screens really regulating and calming and focusing. So I might jump on my computer, I might watch a bit of telly, I might lay in bed and watch some TikToks on my phone. And what might happen is little people might consistently and continuously hop out of bed and come out to say hello. So let's talk about the reason that this happens. When our little people consistently come out of bed, and the reasons, they start off, I don't know if you've noticed, but they start off with having their basic needs met, like, oh, I forgot to have a drink, I need a drink. I think I'll fill a drink bottle and take it to my room. Oh, now I need to go to the toilet because I've been drinking so much. I don't like that toilet. I think I'll use Mum and Dad's toilet in their ensuite. And then they'll come out. And they have to start getting creative. Like, oh, Mum, I just thought I would tell you, well, why did you do that thing 4 years ago and it hurt my feelings? So I get a lot of old stuff dredged up. Or, I want to tell you a story, or I want to see what you're doing, or that's not fair. Particularly if we have a little person with a PDA expression, the sense of justice. So they'll come out sometimes and say, oh, that's not fair. Mum and Dad, how come you're eating ice cream? I want ice cream, even though they've had it. So you get the picture. They come out a lot and they say a lot of different things. Now there's a reason for this. It's because they're connection seeking, one, and two, they're highly anxious and making sure that we're still about. And although that brain really needs to know that we're still about, they have unmet needs. So any time a child is consistently engaging in a behaviour that gets them into trouble, obviously there is an unmet need, because no child wants to be in trouble or disapproved of. And even when it seems that they do, like they might say things to us like, I don't care. Well, I don't really care. I'm not going to bed. That is anxiety. They're seeking control back. Because when we tell our children what to do when they have a PDA expression or they're anxious, there's a loss of control there. So they need to find a way to compensate. And that might be getting out of bed 1,000,000 times. So how do we deal with that when our children get up and get up and get up? This is a difficult one for families because I feel like my response to how do we deal with this with anything to do with autism, PDA, ADHD is always going to be acceptance, intuition, letting go. So we will all do things differently. It's about finding solutions that work for our family. There's no right or wrong. And, despite there being parenting programs and well-meaning professionals and lots of parenting advice, it's important to take into account that our families are unique, that our children are individuals, that our children are people, and they don't respond well to being told what to do or ordered around. And this isn't because they're insubordinate. It's because they are switched on. They are intelligent and they sense our motivation and our intention, and they see through BS. So the thing about our children is that we really win when we're transparent with them. When I say win, I mean we get to connect with them and they get to trust us. Carrie says, haha, I'm writing a book on all the awesome things set in a 4-hour bedtime routine. That's just in one night. I think we could all contribute to that book. Simone, my eldest was and is terrible at bedtime. I always thought and was told that because I'm not great at going to bed, that I was not modelling correctly. Interesting that you say screens are regulating. Both myself and my eldest need to be doing something right before bed. Yes, see, I feel troubled when parents share with me that they've been held responsible for something that their child struggles with when their child has a diverse neurotype or a neurodivergence. Because we're still taking the information that we apply to typical children or non-autistic children and attempting to apply it to autistic children. Now, this seems crazy to me. If our children were able to live in alignment with neuronormative standards comfortably and with ease, they wouldn't have a diagnosis. A diagnosis of autism is based on criteria that they need to meet. And it's almost as though we have our children diagnosed and then everybody goes, okay, now let's try really hard to get them to live life like their non-autistic peers. Okay, so what was the point of us having a diagnosis again? Somebody please remind me. I'm really sorry, Simone, that someone's had you feel that way. Having troubles with bedtime and sleep is very, very normal for autistic people. You can ask so many members of the autistic community and so many of us will say the same thing. So when our children repeatedly hop out of bed to come and share stories with us and tell us secrets and, all the stuff they do, it's important to be responsive. Now, I'm very mindful of whenever I do these lives, I never want anybody to come away from them feeling like they're inadequate or they're not enough or they're not doing the right thing or they're failing their child. Those are the last things I want anybody to feel. Parenting neurodivergent children is largely intuitive. We don't tend to follow rule books. And as much as people say, oh, there aren't any books out there for parenting, yeah, there are. You can go to any bookshop and you can find a multitude of resources on parenting non-autistic children. I'm pretty sure. You could probably also buy a ton of books about parenting autistic children, but I like to encourage people to parent from a space of intuition. What feels right in the moment? How can we be a responsive caregiver, responding to their needs, rather than having this solution over here that we must use every single time this behaviour happens, because then when it doesn't work, we blame ourselves or we get frustrated and it doesn't do anybody any good. So it's okay to change our minds. It's okay to be flexible. It's okay to loosen up whatever rules we have in place. And it's okay to be human and lose it sometimes. Because if we don't want to make mistakes, if we don't want to lose ourselves sometimes, if we don't want to raise our voice and get frustrated, then we are the wrong species. Honestly, we're human beings. So, responding. So when our children come out and say, I want a drink, okay, no problem, grab a drink. And then going back to what we're doing. If they come out 2 seconds later, I need to go to the toilet. No worries. Go to the toilet. Just accepting it. Yep, this is what they're doing. Because what their brain is looking for is consistency. And by responding with acceptance and understanding, without reacting with frustration and annoyance, then we're going to de-escalate that threat response and lower their anxiety. Now, this may not work straight away. We really need to be consistent with the way that we respond to this so that the brain gets the message that, okay, this is no longer a threat. It may take a long time too. Carrie, I hope this reassures everyone here. My girl went to bed at 1 a.m. yesterday and she is not traumatized today by me letting go and accepting that I couldn't control that. I love that. I mean, I don't love that your child was up till 1 a.m. because I know what that can be like. But I love, Carrie, that you've been able to practice self-compassion as well, knowing that you haven't failed. I love that. It's really lovely. Thank you for sharing that. So sometimes asking ourselves, how important is it? How important is this right now in this moment? Does it really matter if my child's up for an extra 5 minutes? Does it really matter if my child watches a movie with me? Because what they are seeking is reassurance and connection. And when we're able to establish that trust and that security and that safety with our children, then they'll get to know themselves better and they'll feel more able to express what they're thinking and feeling. So some of the other strategies, I don't like the word strategy, it feels dishonest to me, but that's only because that's how my PDA brain perceives it. It doesn't mean that it is dishonest. Some of the other approaches that families use are co-sleeping, because some of our children will take a long time for that anxiety to calm down, and they might need to have somebody with them in order to feel safe. So co-sleeping is okay. And if you're not up for co-sleeping, that's okay. Some families with children with a PDA profile let go of having a set bedtime. Now, I know a lot of people out there might be going, oh my God, what? Just letting them do whatever they want? And the thing about having children with a PDA profile is it's not about letting them do what they want. It's about creating an environment that is low demand and highly flexible. And when our children with PDA profiles hit crisis point and they start to really shut down, don't leave their rooms, don't shower, don't brush their teeth, cannot attend school anymore, we're heading into territory that really needs low demands. And the reason we do that again is that consistently delivering a low demand environment over time will decrease that threat response and lower that anxiety. So we often find that when we take the pressure of children with a PDA profile, they just get stuff done because nobody's telling them to. We're able to engage in things when we're not told to. So not having a set bedtime may very well result in a child with a PDA profile just taking themselves off to bed at 7:30. Being mindful that consistency around bedtime may not be a reality. We may have really great nights and we may have nights that are really tough, and that's okay. There's no such thing as normal. There's no such thing as right or wrong when we are raising children, particularly neurodivergent children. It's about finding what works for us and doing what feels comfortable for us. Scout says, absolutely agree. Responsive caregiver, thank you. I needed a phrase for how I parent. Responsive caregiver is a phrase that my best friend over at Raw Heart, who is also a PDA, parenting a PDA, came up with, and I think it's beautiful. Scout is such a cool name, by the way. Is that your real first name? I love it. Lucy says, thank you for the reassurance. It's worked for me for the last 2 years, never going back. Though it's the opposite how I was raised and not many agree. I just want to tell everybody that that's an airplane because I live close to the airport and it's very loud. Yeah, isn't that interesting, Lucy? Because so many of us, it's such a challenge for us to let go of conventional parenting, particularly when we've been raised that way. But many of us find that practicing over time self-compassion, acceptance, being intuitive, living from one moment to the next is really, really helpful for our children. And again, changing our minds is okay. You know, I just find there's so much rigidity around how we parent children that people feel they're failing when things don't work out like the book says it should. And honestly, the amount of families that are sent off to do parenting courses when they take their children for an assessment, and I've talked about this before, an assessment for autism, I find that heartbreaking because it's just further disempowering and disconnecting the parent from their own intuition and their children. It reinforces that messaging that it's something we're doing wrong, when really it's not. Our brains are different. Our processing is different. Some of us struggle to get to sleep at night because we have heightened sensory sensitivity or we have sensory profile differences. Not my real first name, one I adore and would have named my girl if I'd had one. Thank you, Ida. I think it's gorgeous, really gorgeous. And as well, some families use medical intervention, medications, and I'm very aware of that being so varied, and I'm not a medical professional, so I cannot make any suggestions there. However, I would encourage people to not be afraid, to not feel guilty if that's the road you travel down. You know, when we're not getting our basic needs met as parents, then we can't possibly be responsive caregivers to our children. When our children's basic needs aren't met, then their challenges are escalated. So their anxiety is increased. Sometimes OCD will kick in. Our need for control will be increased. And it can just end up in one big mess. So seeking out support, introducing support workers into our home, which can be really scary because if we're autistic, nobody wants us to have strangers in our home, and it took me a long time to be open to having support workers, and it was the best thing we ever did. So having people that we trust who have great connections with our children coming into our home, because there's a lot of talk out there about respite and our families needing respite from their children. I often think it's the other way around. My children need a break from me because, I get a little bit controlly. And remembering that for some of us, our brains don't make enough serotonin and our brains do not make enough melatonin. Melatonin is a sleep hormone, and it's okay to seek medical intervention if that's the case, because melatonin is what we need to fall to sleep. Not to stay asleep, but to fall asleep. And for many of our children, just falling asleep is what they need assistance with, not so much staying asleep. But all of our children are so different. Are there any questions before I finish up? I've just got another consultation in 15 minutes. I'll just wait a couple of seconds because I know we often have a bit of lag here. I have a lot of birds. Welcome to Australia. I mean, I don't own birds, they just fly around and make a lot of noise, especially when I'm doing lives and consultations. No questions? If you have any questions, you can always send me a message at support@intunepathways.com.au. I hope you all enjoy the afternoon and evenings, and I will be back during the week to talk about toileting. Ciao for now.